Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tomonori Sudo, coming from JICA, and I was in charge of climate change policy making at JICA, but unfortunately, I have been transferred to another department. Now, Operation Strategy Department of JICA is now in charge of the overall policy making, policy strategy development in the JICA's operation. And possibly, and in addition to that, now I'm in charge of the African operation in JICA. And today, I would like to make a brief explanation about our activities on the policy development, climate change policy development, utilizing the SEA in Indonesia. First of all, I would like to revisit to the negotiation process of the UNFCCC on the post-Kyoto framework. As you may remind you that the ad hoc working group on LCA has been established at the COP13 in Bali, Indonesia. At that time, the Indonesian government hosted the Conference of the Parties to the UNFCCC, and they made a very big effort to finalize the Bali Action Plan. And the Bali Action Plan focuses on the actions, climate change action by developing countries, especially including the nationally appropriated mitigation actions in the MRV, measurable and reportable and verifiable manner. And also the developing countries focusing on the importance of the adaptation and also request financial assistance from the developed countries. And unfortunately, the last year's Conference of the Parties, they took note that the Copenhagen Accord. But the Copenhagen Accord itself is a very good basis for the negotiation. I'm not sure whether they can reach the agreement at the COP16 in Cancun or not, but now the negotiation is still continue. And the important aspect of the climate change on the developing countries is the nationally appropriate mitigation actions. That is also important issues for the developing countries, especially in China, India, or some emerging countries. And now the Copenhagen Accord requests the developing countries to establish their nationally appropriate mitigation action and register their actions to at the UNFCCC. And that nationally appropriate mitigation action itself is a voluntary action of the developing countries, and that action should be implemented by developing countries in measurable and reportable and verifiable manner. And we now, JICA considers that nationally appropriate mitigation actions as well as the NAPA itself will be applicable of the experiences in the development policy lending scheme. That is very old-fashioned the scheme of the development assistance. Maybe some of the World Bank colleagues also have a great experience on that. But now we consider that such DPL scheme will be applicable to establish and implement, to support the establishment and the implement of the nationally appropriate mitigation action and also NAPA. So unfortunately, this is not a second one. This is the background of the Indonesian status. Unfortunately, the graph is very, very small, so it seems very tough to see. But you can see the left-hand side graph. The Indonesia is now the CO2 emission is now growing in Indonesia, even after the financial crisis in 1997 and also 2008. And in case of the Indonesia, the forest sector is the most important sectors and the most emitting sectors in terms of the GHG emissions because of the reduction of the forest areas in the country. But very luckily, the Indonesian government has already established their 5 years national development plan that is called RJPM in Indonesian language. And at the time of the host of the COP meeting in 2007, the Indonesian government developed their national development planning for climate change and also a national action plan for climate change. This is a very, very basic framework of the climate change action and climate change policy for Indonesian government. But that has not based on the National Development Plan. That has developed by the Ministry of Environment itself. So there is no communication among the line ministries. But we, JICA, had several number of the dialogue with the government of Indonesia, including the planning agency, Bappenas, and also Ministry of Environment, and other line ministries, and including the Ministry of Finance, to collect the appropriate climate change policy actions from the National Development Plan. And how to develop the national climate change policy actions. The policy matrix is the basis of the policy actions for the developing countries. That is also similar to the PRSP, Poverty Reduction Strategy paper. If we provide a general budget support based on to implement the policy reduction actions, then the donors and the developing countries' government agree to establish a policy framework or policy matrix to implement the poverty reductions. So we apply these experiences on climate change issue. First, we can identify several number of the policies in the 5 years development plan in Indonesia. For example, this is a case, some of the examples, like an increasing of the power supply they need. Also, they need an increase of the food supply, and they also need to manage the disaster risks, also forest management, and so on. And others is the education or health sector and so on. But among these kind of the policy actions, we can identify several number of the policies which will be contribute to reduce GHG emission or adaptations. So first, we apply the concept of the SEA. That is the screening. That is the screening of the policy actions using the questions. That is questions from the advisory note of the SEA advisory note on climate change adaptation, or the policy guidance on the integration of the climate change adaptation into development cooperation set by the OECD, DAC, and APOC task team. And then we screening the several number of the policies, and then identify the several number of the policies which will be contribute to reduce the GHG emission and also the strength, the resilience to the climate change in Indonesia, such as the renewable energy development, or the energy efficiency improvement, or the improvement of the existing irrigation systems, or stable food supply, and also the development of the early warning systems, or the preparation of the hazard map, and including the capacity development training, or in the forest management, improving the forest management in the local government, and so on. And by collecting these kind of policies, then we have a dialogue with concerned ministries and some stakeholders to prioritize each kind of the actions. For example, in case of the renewable energies and the energy efficiency project, the first year we identify the renewable energy and the energy efficiency potential in this country, and also identify the availability of the technologies. And second year, identify the priority area for the renewable energy and the sectors, priority sector for energy efficiency. So we are setting such prioritized policy actions year by year. And finally, this country can achieve to the official launch of the new institution to implement the renewable energy development and also energy efficiency project. Then the SEA is a very good tool to identify the important policy in terms of the climate change. Applying the climate change lens, and also the reduction, the potential of the reduction of the GHG emissions from the countries, and also it can be applicable to identify the important projects to contribute to reduce the GHG emission, also strengthening the resilience to the climate change. This is the overall relations between the National Development Plan and NAMA's Nationally Appropriate Mitigation Actions and Adaptations, and also a policy matrix. The policy matrix is was developed under the National Development Plan. Therefore, that the policy actions included in the policy matrix should be included in the National Development Plan. Therefore, that is realized that the ownership of the developing countries itself. And that can cover also the nationally appropriate mitigation actions also and adaptation actions in the developing countries based on the National Development Plan. Therefore, they have an incentive to implement these kind of policy, even if that's the priority of the action is not so high. After the dialogue between the donor agency and also the line ministry or stakeholders, they try to increase their priorities to implement these kind of the policy actions among the other development policies. And this is a basic framework of the policy matrix under the climate change program lending scheme. We have 3 pillars like mitigation, adaptation, and cross-cutting issues. As you can see, that in case of the mitigation, with regard to the mitigation, the leadership, that is the forest management, is the most important area for the Indonesian and also energy sectors. And adaptation, water resource management, and water supply and sanitation, and also agricultural sectors is a focus area for the adaptation. And some of the policy actions that should not covered by the sectors is counted as cross-cutting issues, like the awareness raising of on climate change and mainstreaming the climate change in the next national development policy making, and implementation of the CDM or the core benefit project, and also a fiscal incentive for the private sector is also one of the important points, and so on. The important point is that these policy actions should be implemented by the developing countries' government itself. And we established a steering committee among the donor agency as well as the partner countries' government. And the monitor and review and advices to the line ministries actually implemented these kind of policy actions. And the planning agency, BAPENAS, took a role to coordinate among the line ministries. And also the Ministry of Finance took a role to provide the general budget to the line ministries to implement the policy actions. Of course, the donor agency can provide the technical assistance as well as the financial assistance. This is an example of a part of the policy matrix, just for your reference. And the significance of the SEA in climate change. It is a basic idea, but the SEA are the high-level decision-making tools used to promote the sustainable development. That is a common sense of the SEA. And the policy matrix in the climate change program lending is a pioneer of the voluntary climate change action taken by developing countries. So, it may be applicable to another developing countries. We now applied these activities to the Vietnam and now also try to apply this in the Thailand, Philippines, and Kenya. But climate change action need to be acted by many concerned ministries and agencies. So monitoring meeting is for the CCPL may be meaningful as a venue for coordination or information sharing and experience sharing among the concerned ministries and agencies. And the interactive linkage between the policy actions in the climate change policy lending and the individual project can lead fruitful result. and also the wide range knowledge and experience on policy implementation are necessary for the practical advices. Therefore, I believe that the IAIA, the practitioners of the SEA, can give an advice or the experiences on how to implement these kind of policy actions by developing countries. Thank you very much for your cooperation.